Given how this is the Halloween season, I thought it'd be appropriate to review a movie from the Halloween movie series. Halloween 2, the 1981 version. For anyone who hasn't watched me, last year I did a very, very long review of John Carpenter's Halloween. It was my longest review for a while at 80 minutes. And in case anyone's wondering, don't worry, I'm not going to go as long for Halloween 2. And I do love Halloween 2, but it is the sequel, and it's not full-on John Carpenter. But as far as movie sequels go that were made simply because the first one was a huge success, Halloween 2 is very good. It is a great follow-up to the original, which is a classic, and it definitely has the feel of a sequel that was made purely because the first one was so successful, and even though the first one ended on an amazing cliffhanger, John Carpenter and his co-writer of the first one, Deborah Hill, didn't really want to return for a sequel. Which is, I think, a little odd given just how sequel-baiting the first one's ending was. If you don't want to make a sequel, then don't sequel bait. Anyway, moving on. The plot for Halloween 2 takes place on the exact same night as the first one. In fact, the opening picks up literally about half a minute after the ending of the first movie. And if you haven't seen the first Halloween, you probably shouldn't watch this review. But anyway, Dr. Loomis has just shot Michael Myers and goes down to find that his body has disappeared, which instills in Loomis's mind that Michael Myers is no longer really human and is near indestructible. And then we see Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis's character from the first film, being taken to the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, I think. And as the Halloween night goes on, all the way into the early morning of November 1st, the police and Dr. Loomis search as hard as they can to try and find Myers, while Myers himself tracks down Laurie to the hospital. And then this leads to a lot of great scenes of Michael Myers killing his way through the hospital staff to get to Laurie, and Laurie getting some kind of flashback. It's a little confusing when you see it, but she's getting flashbacks that lead to the eventual twist. Well, it's not so much of a twist because everybody who knows the series, even those that haven't seen it, kind of know it, that Laurie is Michael Myers' younger sister, and she never knew about him, and Michael either knows about her, or this is all just a very big fucking coincidence, and he's trying to get to her like he did to his older sister all those years ago. So yeah, the plot is sticking pretty closely to that of the first film, and while it does copy a lot of elements of the first film, there's a lot of very cool and well-directed scenes here that make you don't really mind the fact that it is just a copy type of sequel. And to be clear, I do love Halloween 2. There are a ton of well-directed suspense scenes, one of which is the inevitable killer chasing the heroine scene, and the big chase scene between Michael Myers and Laurie Strode in this movie is just amazing. It is something that you can say is definitely better than the first film. I mean, the first one is the undeniable classic that almost nobody can top. But it didn't really have a huge, elaborate chase scene. And during this chase scene, we get this great shot of Michael Myers slowly coming down a staircase, and this is something in horror movies, particularly the Friday the 13th movies, that I've always been bugged by, but doesn't totally bug me here. It's where the killer is walking at a slow pace, and for some reason is able to catch up to the man or woman he's chasing, even though they are running. However, here, during this chase, Lori is injured and also medicated, so it kind of makes a little bit of sense that he's able to catch up with her, and she's not able to totally outrun him, because while she's running, she's trying to keep her head on straight and not pass out. But this shot of Michael coming down the staircase rather slowly, step by step, I just think that is chilling, and it just truly shows that he is almost an indestructible, inhuman thing, I guess. And the very well done direction of Halloween 2 is not done by John Carpenter this time. It's done by a man named Rick Rosenthal, who also directed Halloween Resurrection about 21 years later. And as far as I can tell, Rick did a bang-up job. It doesn't feel like a different style, but it does feel like it's being its own thing, where it has just enough of the original, but it's also kind of unique, and so you know that this is not exactly the same film. And while John Carpenter didn't direct the film, the man in Deborah Hill did return to both write the screenplay and produce the movie. So this is probably the truest of the Halloween sequels, because it had the most people from the first film come back. And Carpenter, of course, contributed to the music score, like he does for most of his movies. Here he scored the film with the help of someone named Alan Howarth. And just to give credit to the other crew, the associate producer was a guy named Barry Bernardi, and it was executive produced by Irwin Yablans and Joseph Wolfe. I don't know them for anything else but the Halloween movies. And Halloween 2 was once again produced by the late Mustafa Akkad, and also by producer of many cult 80s films, Dino De Laurentiis. And this film is also trying to be a little more exploitive than the original Halloween, which, if anyone remembers, didn't really have any real R-rated language other than a few shits, I think. And there wasn't a lot of explicit nudity, and there was almost no blood in the original Halloween. There were a lot of good kill scenes, but surprisingly, when you watch it, remember, there are only 2 instances where you actually see blood. Halloween 2 has a lot more gory scenes, and not complaining, I fucking love gore. But I'm just showing the differences between the two. The first one was able to be very suspenseful and very scary, very atmospheric, without having to use much gorier bits. And the sequel does have them, and you think it could have worked without it, but they are there probably because by this point slasher films were becoming a big thing, and John Carpenter thought the movie should resemble the others that were coming out at the time. And the kill scenes here are pretty cool. We get a lot of great death scenes. We get people in the hospital getting hit in the head with a hammer. We get a woman in a therapy pool drowned in the water while the pool's temperature has been raised to a very high level. So next to like drowning in the water, she also gets her skin burned off. Real pasta looking. And my favorite kill scene, while it may not be considered that impressive to many, it's when Michael Myers is behind a nurse and holding a scalpel, he stabs her in the back and with a very firm grip is able to lift her up into the air, and she dies, and then he just lets her fall right off. To me, that kill and the shot of him coming down the stairs very slowly are two of his most badass moments. I just thought it was like the ultimate cold-blooded kill from him. And before I forget, there's a great aftermath scene where we see this head nurse who has been strapped to a surgical table, and we see that one of those tubes for blood transfusions has been stuck in her arm, and she has pretty much had all the blood drained out of her, resulting in the room being a pool of blood. And it's just awesome. The film itself, as far as a cinematography level goes, as I said, is extremely well shot. The cinematography was done by Dean Cundey, who was nominated for an Oscar for his work on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he was given a very good setting. Because I love the fact that this movie, like, it definitely goes beyond just a couple of houses. With the whole hospital setting, it allows for some great chilly imagery and good establishing bits. I really like that they went with a hospital because, for many people, including me, I personally, I get kind of creeped out when I go to hospitals. And while I do love Halloween 2, there is one major thing about this movie that I think is extremely stupid. Just straight up retarded stupid. And that is the fact that throughout the majority of the film, we only see about 8 or 12 people working in this hospital, and other than Jamie Lee Curtis and a kid who comes in for an emergency and a scene where we see a bunch of newborns, we don't see anybody in this hospital. I'm serious. Other than maybe 2 people in the newborn ward, there are no fucking patients in this hospital. And as for the staff, there is only a few nurses, 1 doctor, and a security guard. I guess it's because with too many people, it would make it hard to pull off the chilling, empty setting. And the reason this bugs me is because I have been to a hospital many times in my life, not for health reasons, mainly because my grandmother was a nurse and she would take me just to see it when I was little. But I know that there is no way that these would be the only people working in a fucking hospital. And it's not a small hospital either. It's huge. Like it's probably bigger than a high school is. And it takes place at night, and someone, I think, mentioned perhaps the night staff is shorter than others. No. I have spent the night in a hospital, and even at night, the staff in those places is still going pretty regularly. There's still a lot of people on the clock. So, this is the one thing in Halloween 2 that I genuinely have an issue with. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, I can't be the only one that thinks this is stupid, and while the horror and scares are great, this is something I just could not overlook when watching it. And I just can't praise the cinematography in this film enough, so let's talk about the music. As I said, John Carpenter came back and Alan Howarth helped him with the music, and yeah, Carpenter, even he needs an assistant every once in a while, I guess. I'm kidding, I'm sure they were good partners. And the music here is pretty excellent. The score, the same theme is back, except there's been a few note changes, once again to show that, yes, while they are copying the first film at times, they're also adding a few new touches. And the final theme between Laurie and Michael is just incredible, amazing. It's this great type of score, and well, that retarded version I did probably does it no favors. If you watch the film and you pay attention to the music during the big chase as well as the big finale, you just feel like your heart is rising up your throat. It's the best description I can give when it comes to the climax music. Something that I thought was an interesting touch was the very first minute of Halloween 2, before we even get the flashback to the ending of the first film, is we hear this song called Mr. Sandman. People who've seen Back to the Future and who are 1950s buffs will probably know this song. It's this, I guess, cute little melody. It's a song of its time, and it's about going to sleep, and I guess the song has certain parallels to the theme of death in this movie. It's a fun thing. It's where you get a violent or scary movie and you put a nice song over what's going on. And sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes off as a little pretentious. I didn't get that here. I thought it worked very well. The only other real musical bit in the film is a scene where this obnoxious stoner character, who's ignoring all the killings that are going on and just wants to get laid, that kind of character, he sings, "Amazing grace, come sit on my face, don't make me cry, I need your pie." The character's a real asshole, but that bit was fucking great, fucking hilarious. I love that small scene. And going back to what I said about this one being a little more exploitive than the first one, there's a scene where these two characters named Bud, played by Leo Rossi, the pie guy, and Karen, played by Pamela Susan Shoop, that's a name. They go into the therapy pool, I guess. It looks more like a hot tub to me. And their plan is just to fuck in the hot water, and they're doing all this while on break time, while there's a killer on the loose in town, and yeah, you know what's gonna happen to them. Anyway, Karen gets in the tub, and before she gets in, we get a good 10-second shot of her topless, and it's a pretty nice tit shot. And you think, must have been a cold day when they filmed it, because those nipples look like they could cut glass. And then we get a good shot of Leo Rossi getting out of the tub, and we see he's got a pretty tasty looking ass. And crazy thing is that he's over 70 now, so in your prime, man, in your fucking prime. Or maybe he's over 60. Either way, he's old now. The actress is probably old too, but I don't remember when she was born. Since I'm talking about actors, let's get into the cast. A lot of actors returned from the first film. Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance return as Laurie Strode and Dr. Sam Loomis. And in my review of the first Halloween, I talked about how I really love Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in that film. It is one of the very best of her career, and rewatching these movies, watching her, just make me realize that she is, if not my all-time favorite, is one of my favorite actresses. I love watching Jamie Lee Curtis in just about everything, and even if the movie is shit, she usually puts in a pretty damn good job. She's really fucking talented. She can emote all sorts, and last time I talked about her, I kind of drifted a little. But I think she's amazing, and here is Laurie Strode. It's not as powerful a performance as it was in the first one, but that's not Jamie's fault. It's more the fact that she's not given a ton to do in this movie, and just like the first one, neither is Donald Pleasence. Most of the film focuses on Michael Myers and the random, almost nameless hospital staff who he's killing off, and for most of the film, Laurie is sedated, and with her character, we get these very weird scenes that I said earlier, kind of come off as flashbacks. And through these flashbacks, it's implied that she had maybe met Michael once, which does not make any sense given the character history that we're given with her and him. But maybe it's going into what would later become a thing with the other sequels, with the psychic bullshit. And once again, during the huge chase at the end, we get to see that Laurie, while she whimpers and cries and is running for her life, shows that she can be equally as tough as Michael Myers in the fact that she takes a lot of hits. Like in the first film, she smashed glass with her bare hands and kept going. In this one, she's got a injured leg, an injured arm, and she's heavily medicated. And yet she runs with all the speed she can muster all the way through a hospital, 2 stories down and 1 story up. And when the time comes, she does fight back as much as she can. And I read that, like the first film, there was a lot of criticism from feminists about the way this character is portrayed and the scenarios, and I'm not one to talk when it comes to thinking too hard on things. I mean, that's kind of what I do. But for the whole Laurie and whether or not she's too weak, I heavily disagree, because while she does cry and get scared, she keeps going, and I don't know what's going through the head of the feminists who critique the first 2 Halloween films. But for me, Laurie Strode, while the character cries a lot, physically she is very tough. Moving on to the character of Dr. Sam Loomis. Donald Pleasence turns in another very good performance. This was actually the same year that he co-starred in the directed John Carpenter movie, Escape from New York, and here we get to see a lot more of Loomis. I mean, his screen time is still limited, but he does a bit more than the first film, and here he unfortunately starts this thing that would become a problem in the latter films. Loomis is so obsessed with catching Michael Myers that he spurts off, sounds off, just screams about how he's not human, how he needs to be stopped, while sounding himself like a crazy motherfucker. And this is a cliche that I really hate seeing in especially in horror films. It's where one character who knows all the answers, when trying to make the other characters understand, just screams and makes himself look crazy and acts frustrated when people don't take them seriously and don't listen to them. Me, I'm thinking, dude, can you not hear yourself fucking talk? I mean, it's not so bad here in Halloween 2, but wait until we get to Halloween fucking 5. I don't even want to get into that piece of shit. But yeah, Donald Pleasance does a pretty good job, and the final climax between Loomis, Laurie, and Michael. I've mentioned already how it's an incredible, intense climax, but the final scene gives Loomis probably one of his greatest badass moments. Like, he is Michael's enemy, but he's not an action hero type adversary for Michael. And during the final scene, Laurie has shot Michael Myers in the eyes, and showing that he is almost a Terminator. This doesn't kill him. It just makes it so he can't see. And then Loomis fills the room with some kind of flammable gas, and as Laurie runs out, Loomis has this excellent badass moment where, as the room is filled with flammable gas, he goes, "It's time, Michael." And then the whole hallway goes up in flames, and I'm a huge fan of big fireball explosions, so you know this scene was just ecstasy for me. And then we get the cool image of Michael Myers walking around, his whole body in flames, and you think, yep, nothing can stop this guy. And then he falls down, and just so that people can understand the behind the scenes of this series, Halloween 2 was genuinely meant to be the final film to feature Laurie Strode, Michael Myers, and Dr. Loomis. And this was supposed to genuinely be Michael's death. And Loomis apparently was supposed to go with him. And I guess if this was the final Halloween film, I would have thought, aw, I want to see more of these characters. But at the same time, it definitely ends on a note that could have been a decent wrap-up, but also did leave room open for potential sequels, which it did get. And for anyone who has been living under a rock, the third Halloween film that came out 1 year after Part 2 was Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. And despite being called Halloween 3, it is notorious amongst Halloween fans for not featuring Michael Myers, not having any of the original characters. And Halloween 3 is more or less its own standalone movie. It's about witchcraft and children being sacrificed to some evil god. Yes, this is the real plot to a sequel to Halloween. You see, originally John Carpenter, who was still a producer of the series at the time, wanted all sequels after Halloween 2 to be their own stories, kind of like an anthology series. And unfortunately, with Halloween 3 failing amongst critics and fans and the box office, this idea was abandoned, and then they went back to the Michael Myers storyline. And just to be clear, I really love Halloween 3. I think Halloween 3 is a pretty good, solid 80s horror film, and the best thing to watch that can possibly persuade people who don't like the movie just because it doesn't have Michael Myers would be Brad Jones's TV show 80s Dan. and the Halloween episode where 80s Dan and the 80s Dan cast watch Halloween 3. It's a very good nostalgia-themed web series by Brad Jones, aka the Cinema Snob. And the last thing I'll say about Halloween 3, and then I'll get back to, yeah, this is a Halloween 2 review, but the last thing I'll say is the anthology idea for the Halloween series was not a bad one. The reason I think it failed was the fact that the first sequel in the series was a continuation of the first movie. With that, I just don't think the anthology idea stood much of a chance. Alright, I think it's time I try to wrap this video up, so I'll try to give a quick run through of the cast. Charles Cyphers also returns as Sheriff Lee Brackett from the first film, but he's booted out about 25 minutes in, so makes you kind of wonder why they kept the character around. I mean, his reason for going out is understandable, but it's pretty fucking abrupt. And then we get this other guy, Deputy Gary Hunt, played by Hunter Von Leer, who takes over as the policeman of the film, and Hunter Von Leer does a very good job, and the Hunt character is very enjoyable. He's a good, reasonable policeman, and he works very well against Donald Pleasance in the scenes they have together. Lance Guest as Jimmy. He was an ambulance driver who takes an interest in Laurie Strode, and he's, I guess, the pointless love interest character. But Lance Guest does a pretty good job as this character and makes him pretty tolerable. The character does have a few creepy moments, like lovingly touching the medicated, sleeping Laurie's hand. Gloria Gifford as Mrs. Alves, who's the head nurse, and she's, this character's kind of a bitch. Like Mrs. Alves, she is real tight-ass to the point you think her asshole could bend a metal cane, but in the end, she's just a nurse who's trying her best to run a wing of a hospital, and the way she is this character is nice and patient with the patients, but with the staff, she's just an unsympathetic, by the book woman, and I'm pretty sure from someone who witnesses the way she would talk to the employees, she would come off as, yeah, a super mega bitch character. But from a nurse standpoint, like if I showed this character to my grandma, who was a nurse for 27 years, I think she would say that this is a top-notch nurse in her opinion. And the other members of the hospital staff are Jill, played by Tawny Moyer, the knife-in-the-back person. Janet, played by Anna Alicia. She's the one who gets the needle in the head. And Dr. Mixter, he's the guy who gives Laurie a shot at the beginning, played by Ford Rainey. Mr. Garrett, the stereotypical fat security guard who doesn't pay attention to the monitors. He's played by Cliff Emick. And they all do pretty decent jobs. Which, by the way, security monitors, you have to wonder, especially today, how someone like Michael Myers would get around. Just a random thought. We also get the return of Nancy Stevens as Marion, the nurse who was driving Dr. Loomis at the beginning of the first film, and appears halfway through this one, and pretty impressed that they remembered to bring the same actress back for the same character. She shows up and she's the one who reveals the fact that Laurie is actually Michael Myers' sister. And even though it had been 4 years after the first film, Nancy Keys, formerly known as Nancy Loomis, returns for about half a minute to play the character Annie's corpse. So, yeah, give her props for coming back for such a small part, but it was cool that she did that, I think. And Halloween 2 also started this tradition for the series where the police or Dr. Loomis see a character who's wearing a mask, just like the one Michael Myers has, and they mistake that person for him. In this one, we see this random guy who's wearing a mask, who ends up accidentally getting smashed into by a car, which causes a fire, and this unfortunate person ends up getting burned alive. And for a while they think it may be Michael, but after examining the teeth, they find out it's not him. This character is supposed to be Ben Tramer, a boy that Laurie mentioned having a crush on in the first film. And he's played by Jack Verbois. Verbois. And now let's get to the motherfucker who played Michael Myers himself. And before I say this guy's name, I have to warn you, the name of the actor who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2, this guy has probably one of the most awesome names that an actor playing a slasher villain could have. Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger, Kane Hodder is Jason Voorhees. They're great, but their names are not compared to this guy's name. The actor who played Michael Myers, aka The Shape in Part 2, his name is Dick Warlock. I am 100% serious. The name of the guy who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2 was Dick Warlock. I just think that is probably one of the most awesome names that a human being could have. And it's not a made-up name. Dick's son or his brother, I know his son was an extra in this movie, but there was also another guy and they all had the same last name. There were 3 Warlocks in Halloween 2. So yeah, this is his real name, Dick Warlock. That is awesome. And as Michael Myers, Dick Warlock did a very good job. He had a good, slow, menacing walk to him. And funny enough, Dick Warlock also plays the policeman who ends up crashing into the innocent bystander who gets burned alive. So, he plays 2 killers in this movie. Badass motherfucker, man. By the way, there's alcohol in this. And, I'm gonna wrap this review up by just mentioning some quick trivia. The monster movie marathon that was going on in the first one with Forbidden Planet and The Thing from Another World is still going apparently, and the movie in this film is pretty cool enough. Night of the Living Dead, the original. Probably because it's public domain, but it's still pretty cool to see. And the last thing I'll say is, the opening credits for this film copies the one from the first one, and it's same thing, jack-o'-lantern, camera slowly zooms in, except, except the jack-o'-lantern in this film is not as scary, but it, once again, ups it a bit. When we zoom in on this jack-o'-lantern, the jack actually, the pumpkin splits in half and opens up, revealing that there's a skull inside. may sound silly, and I may be a little out of it, but it's a dark, it's a purple tinted scene, very dark, and once again the Halloween score is fucking awesome. Something that makes certain people fucking pussies, but opening credits, whole movie. If I had to give a rating to Halloween 2, I'd give it a 8 out of 10. And I'm not going too high with that. It's a pretty great horror film. It's a worthy sequel, and it's a fun ride. And I love watching it every time I see it. Same with the first film.